Thanks, Mary, for that introduction. I'm just trying to find, here it is. Great. Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much to Biocan RX for the opportunity to chat with you folks today. We're going to spend the next 20 to 25 minutes talking about how technologies are adopted into the Ontario healthcare system and how what criteria we use to reimburse them. Hopefully you'll learn a little bit along the way about Health Quality Ontario and the role that agency plays in the adoption pathway, and a little bit about the process of something called health technology assessment, which is a way of evaluating the evidence to determine whether a technology is beneficial to patients and is also a good use of our public resources. So when I was doing a little bit of homework to prepare for this, I went onto the B3 workshop website, and I wanted to understand, well, who will I be speaking to today? I came across the paragraph on who should attend, and it really was the first sentence that caught my attention. Not so much about the introductory overview, but more so about the area of translating a therapeutic discovery to benefit a patient. And it's really the latter part of that sentence where my team and where Health Quality Ontario does the focus of its work, and that's in trying to figure out how these technologies that have taken years and years and years to develop, how they eventually and effectively are benefiting the patient. And I like to think of the whole research translation pathway of one about does it work? So in the early stages, all the research and development is looking at does the technology do what we hope it's going to do? And I'm sure along the way there's many failures and redesigns in order to make that happen. And then it moves into something called does it matter? If we use it, is it really having a big impact on the patient's quality of life, on their quality of care? Is it creating a meaningful change in the patient's day-to-day life? And that can be patients like little Emily Whitehead here, who in 2012 was diagnosed with leukemia with a very grim outlook. And she participated in a clinical trial in a hospital down in Philadelphia with CAR T-cell therapy, which I'm sure folks here know much more than I do about. And today, 6 years later, she is 12 and she's living a disease-free life. So inarguably, a huge impact and a meaningful outcome for this little girl. So as the provincial advisor on quality of healthcare, Health Quality Ontario has a vision of better health for every Ontarian, as well as developing excellent quality of healthcare. And I think to echo Paul's comment, the previous speaker, we don't do this alone. Success doesn't happen in isolation, and to build a better healthcare system, we have to partner with the folks in the system like yourselves who are starting at the innovation stage, right through to the clinical researchers, right through to the people who give clinical care, and importantly, to the patients who are receiving the care. And it's together in that partnership that we're trying to bring about these meaningful improvements in healthcare. We're so charged about trying to bring quality into the healthcare system that we've boldly gone forward and developed a framework outlining the 6 criteria or characteristics of a system, healthcare system, that is a culture of quality. And these were adopted from the Institute of Medicine, and they're basically 6 very, very profound, I think, but very important elements that say a healthcare system that is based on quality healthcare is safe, provides safe care, it provides effective care, it is patient-centered, it provides effective healthcare that is efficient use of public funds and public resources. It provides timely health care, and it provides health care that's equitable. So much of the work that Health Quality Ontario does is mandated and set out in the Excellent Care for All Act, which is a provincial act which was proclaimed in 2010. And through that act, we have a number of obligations. And one is to monitor and report to the people of Ontario on the quality indicators and if Ontario healthcare system is hitting its targets for quality healthcare. It's also to support continued quality improvement. It's also to promote the engagement with patients so we can get that vision of quality healthcare system. And finally, it's to promote healthcare that's supported by evidence. And we realize that obligation by evaluating promising innovations and practices in our health technology assessment program. Now, health technology assessment is it's a multidisciplinary policy research framework which includes looking at various aspects of a technology, the effectiveness, the cost effectiveness, the patient preferences and values, the equity issues involved in adopting and delivering this specific intervention into the healthcare system. So I'm going to take you through an example of one, and this could be, you can think in the back of your mind when I'm talking about this, about an intervention that you're contemplating right now, and you know, it might be 5 or 10 years away from bringing it into clinical practice, but at the end of the day, we have to figure out how that intervention is going to matter to people, how it's going to change their lives. So this is our patient who woke up yesterday and was having a good day till about noon when he started to get a bit of blurred vision, a bit of drooping in the side of his face, a bit of slurred speech, and wasn't feeling too great. His friends whisked him off to the hospital. Indeed, after a bit of diagnostic evaluation, he was told that he has a clot in a vessel in his brain. And this clot was causing the blood flow to be interrupted, so parts of his brain were not receiving enough oxygen. This is known to most people as a stroke. So the current treatment in Ontario for folks that are having this clot in their brain is to get an intravenous medicine called a thrombolytic. And this goes into their systemic blood system up to the brain and breaks apart the clot. Clot goes away. The blood flow is restored to the part of the brain, and hopefully the devastating effects of the stroke are gone. The problem is there's a couple of things. The medicine is very good, but there's an optimal time to actually optimal window with which we can receive that medicine. And the other thing is if clots get stuck in a very large vessel in the brain, there is not a good effect of these clot busting treatments. So along comes an innovation called a stent retriever, which can do a procedure called a mechanical thrombectomy. And essentially, you put a guide wire into the vessel of the brain, it reaches out, it grabs the clot, pulls the clot back, no more clot, good blood flow, no more stroke. And the big question that then comes to Health Quality Ontario is, should patients be treated with this new treatment for stroke, this mechanical thrombectomy? And then how do we decide if we want to use public funds to pay for this so it can be available for all folks in Ontario? So, you know, I'm sure you heard a lot about the idealized innovation pathway today: basic science, research and development, clinical trials, regulatory approval, adoption, post-marketing clinical trials, now getting a little bit of a new spin called real-world evidence. My world sits down at the funding decision and deciding how we optimally use these interventions. So we're relying on a lot of information that's already been done to help us make that decision. And it's important that the folks that are doing the 5, 10, and 15 years before it gets to our group are thinking about what we need when we are considering the information we're going to need when we're considering how to fund and how to use these technologies. The Excellent Care for All Act actually gives Health Quality Ontario the opportunity to make recommendations based on this evidence. And we make those recommendations to the Ministry of Health, the Government of Ontario, and the recommendations advise the Ministry of Health on whether they ought to fund a treatment or not fund a treatment, and this is based on the evidence that we review. In considering funding recommendations, we also have to consider the public resources, so that efficiency part of a quality healthcare system. We have to take that into consideration when we're asking ourselves, should we put public dollars into funding this technology? So I'll just do a little bit of level setting, and we use this word technology all the time, and I heard it indeed as I was listening to the previous speaker, and I was happy about that because I always get asked, well, what is a technology? Are you working with computers, or are you just working with widgets and gadgets? In fact, it's a term whose history is about 40, 50 years old now, but it essentially is any treatment for a healthcare condition. It can be a drug, it can be a vaccine, it can be a test to screen or diagnose a patient, it can be a surgical procedure, or a way of delivering care in the healthcare system. At Health Quality Ontario, we do evaluate everything on there except drugs and vaccines. That is done with our other partners within the Ministry of Health. So in order to complete a health technology assessment, we actually first have to identify what technologies are out there. And that is done through an application process on our website. And anybody in Ontario can put in an application. So a patient, we can have industry, we can have a researcher or clinician, and it's a quick form to fill out, and it basically is identifying for us the technology, what it's used for, why you want an HTA assessment, and it's usually because funding does not exist currently for the technology. We think it's better than the current treatment. We think there's evidence out there to show a benefit to patients, and we hopefully, through that evaluation, will get public funding recommendation for that technology. We get about 30 applications a year, and that's more than we can actually resource to do a health technology assessment. So we have to prioritize these topics, and it's not an easy decision to make because arguably every topic is important to a patient in Ontario. But we do get heads around the table. We have a way of prioritizing it based on 10 criteria. And once that's done, the topics that are at the top of the list will go into our HTA development process. I'll talk a little bit about the components of an HTA in the next slide. Once an HTA is developed, that package of information is presented to our Ontario Health Technology Advisory Committee, or OTAC as we call it. And they're a group of, right now, 18 pretty wise people that sit around the table. They have backgrounds in epidemiology and health economics. They're clinicians, they're administrators, and they weigh up and deliberate the benefits and the risks and the value for money of these technologies. And based on that deliberation, they'll make a draft recommendation on whether to fund with public dollars the technology and whether to adopt it in Ontario or not. The draft recommendation is posted on our website for public comment. And indeed, if you go to our website, you can sign up for alerts for those to come to your email, so you can reply back to our draft recommendations and let us know whether we got it right, whether we got it wrong, or in fact, whether we got it partly right, and maybe there's a better way of actually framing the recommendation. This information is then brought back to OTAC, and in consideration of that public comment, OTAC will either revise the recommendation or ratify the draft recommendation as final. The final recommendation is required to be approved by the Board of Directors of Health Quality Ontario, and once that's done, the package of information, the evidentiary package, or the health technology assessment report, and the recommendation is sent to our Minister of Health for his consideration. And he can choose to accept the recommendation and act in accordance with that recommendation, or based on his decision-making, can choose to reject. We've been very fortunate so far. We seem to have gotten it right, and all of the recommendations we've put forward have been accepted so far. Talked a little bit about that middle box of what is an HTA and what do we consider when we're developing that evidentiary piece. I like to think of an HTA as actually a mutual fund because it's got really buckets of information. We talked about the effectiveness, about it having that really patient relevant outcome benefit. Another aspect of it is looking at the value for money. And this is a very important aspect because it speaks to, if we adopt this technology, are we going to be able to use our resources efficiently? And more importantly, why we do that is because for every technology we adopt with public funds, it means we're not going to adopt another one. Okay, there's an opportunity cost to paying for one technology. Means perhaps another technology will not be affordable down the road. So we have to be very careful when we're making commitments with public dollars. We want to make sure that we're getting technologies that are really good value for the money we're spending. We do speak with patients, and I think this is the real partnership aspect of our work. We talk with patients to understand the lived experience. We talk with patients to understand what treatments they have used in the past, the pros and the cons, the barriers to receiving treatment. Through those preferences and values, we're able to contextualize the evidence to really understand what outcomes are important to patients, what difficulties they have in getting treatment, what are the needs for their treatment needs. We do have an equity focus, so we want to make sure that if something is effective, that we are looking to see whether folks across all sorts of patient characteristics are able to achieve that same outcome with the technology as folks with different outcomes. So we want to make sure that we're not having any inequity in care if we adopt the technology. Clinical experts are valuable input into our work. They help us understand they contextualize the patient care management pathway. They help us understand the pathophysiology of the healthcare condition. They also help us understand what barriers are out there to care and the complexities of the care. Importantly, too, we also engage with industry. Behind every technology, arguably most technologies that are like the mechanical thrombectomy stent, there's an industry that actually developed this, and they're marketing it, and they have a lot of great insight into how this works. And so we do meet with them so they can understand what we are doing, and we can understand a little bit more about often the genesis or the development of the technology. And I'll just move on. So let's go back to our stent retriever. The question was, should we use this? Should we use it for this patient that's in need of it right now? And then should we actually publicly fund it for everybody in Ontario? And this was a real question that came to us about 1.5 years ago. And we looked at the evidence for effectiveness from the published literature. And from the clinical trials, now I'm not too sure if everybody's familiar with a forest plot. And let's see, it wasn't working earlier. Huh, here, was I in luck? No, it's a little finicky. But so forest plot is just a way of representing all the data in a graphical way. And every blue dot on the right-hand side of the graph is really the mean data point of the study. And the horizontal line is really the variance, so the dispersion of the data. And statistically, what happens is we aggregate all these together, and we come out with a pooled estimate of whether folks who are receiving the mechanical thrombectomy are actually doing better than folks who are receiving the current treatment, which is just the drug that busts up the clot. And the outcome here is mortality, which is a very important and relevant outcome for patients. And what we find is if the folks that are getting the mechanical thrombectomy are doing no worse than the folks that are getting the clot busting treatment. So there's a reduction in mortality, but it's not significant. So they're not having a greater reduction in mortality than folks who are getting the clot busting treatment. Okay, so would have been more impressive if they were, but not too bad. But then we come along with the second outcome, and this is functional independence after a stroke. And what we find is folks that are getting the mechanical thrombectomy are actually having twice the ability to recover their function after a stroke and after being treated with a mechanical thrombectomy than folks who are just getting the clot-busting drug. This is a huge impact, a huge relevant outcome, and very, very important effect of this new treatment. So based on that, we went and we said, looks pretty good. Folks who get the mechanical thrombectomy actually can recover their independence, functional independence, more often than folks who are just getting the drug. And their mortality is no different, which is good. Then we go on to ask, is this good value for money? And so this is what's called a cost-effectiveness plane. And across the x-axis is the effect, measurement of the effect, and the y-axis is a measurement of the cost. And we have a blue triangle right there, which is an average estimate of all those microsimulations. And that blue triangle says that it's going to cost us about $12,000 more to use the mechanical thrombectomy to get better health. Okay, so we get better health when we use the mechanical thrombectomy, but we're going to pay for that. We're going to have to pay a little bit more for better health. And the amount we're going to pay, the incremental amount we're going to pay, is $12,000. Now, do you think that's good? Or do you think that's expensive? Great? Yeah, as it turns out, it is great. The OTAC committee doesn't have a threshold they use for measuring cost effectiveness. Conventionally, and in other jurisdictions around the world, $50,000 per effect, something called the quality of life years gained. $50,000 to pay for better health is around the world in other jurisdictions the threshold. This is markedly under that. You can see the green diagonal line represents the willingness for public to pay for $50,000 to get better health. And that blue dot is well under that. So it turns out that this is a highly cost-effective treatment. So after considering all that evidence, Health Quality Ontario, advised by OTAC, recommended that we publicly fund these stent retrievers so that patients in Ontario could receive mechanical thrombectomy treatment across Ontario with public dollars. We do a number of technologies in our health technology assessment program. Here's a bit of a list of what we're working on right now. I've bolded a few of them just to show you that it's across different types of technologies. Home delivery of subcutaneous immunoglobulin. This is we're evaluating a service delivery model and whether that service delivery model is more effective and is more cost-effective and is more preferable to patients, and if this is how we should deliver immunoglobulin therapy in Ontario versus having folks go into a clinic hospital to receive this IV therapy. Non-invasive prenatal testing is a diagnostic test. Minimally invasive glaucoma surgery, a surgical procedure. So, and then you see there's a few specific other diagnostic tests and different devices like cochlear implants and retinal prosthesis. Lots of challenges in evaluating technologies for reimbursement and adoption into Ontario. One is we struggle with what's the optimal time point to evaluate the technology. Too early in its development often leads to inefficient evidence, and we're unable actually to make a recommendation, and it usually ends up being a don't fund recommendation because we just don't have enough. There's too much uncertainty as to whether this technology is actually having the patient benefit that we want and is cost effective. Conversely, too late in the diffusion of the technology means that stuff gets into the healthcare system, which may not be effective and may not be efficient, and it's very hard to pull things out of the system once it's in. Are we reviewing the right technologies? Well, I talked a little bit about the prioritization process we have. And it's a difficult process, but I think it's an important process because determining the relevancy of a technology because it takes a while to develop a health technology assessment, it's very important that we're actually working on and evaluating topics that are relevant. So always a challenge on determining what that relevant topic is. Involving patients in our work is central to what Health Quality Ontario does, and we're always looking for better ways and more robust ways to engage patients to understand what's meaningful to them. We have a new file, and that's to review genetic tests. We have the Ontario Genetic Advisory Committee, which is a subcommittee to OTAC, and their mandate is to review genetic tests and advise, again, on which tests ought to be recommended in the province. Genetic tests, huge area of development, huge areas of research, huge turnover, very fast. And the challenge there is to keep up with the number of tests that are coming to market every day. Rare conditions can be a challenge in terms of our value framework we use to make our decisions. And the supporting efforts to reduce uncertainty. I talked a little bit earlier about the optimal time to evaluate a technology. And oftentimes when we evaluate the evidence and there's a lot of uncertainty on whether this technology works or not, the question is, how do we reduce that uncertainty so we can make a decision, maybe in a year's time? And for that, we rely on the researchers to hopefully do the proper clinical trials with the meaningful outcomes. So when we are reviewing the evidence, the uncertainty is reduced. And we become very certain about the benefit to the patient. Finally, there are lots of HTA partners across Canada, indeed nationally and internationally. There are more technologies to evaluate than any one agency can actually take on, and we have to look for efficiencies in actually carrying out these HTA evaluations so we can keep up with the number of technologies that are coming to market and potentially being very beneficial and also very efficient use of resources. The final thing is linking funding recommendations to implementation. So where we may say we think it should be publicly funded, the question then, it goes from there, how do we then implement that recommendation? How do we actually get it into the system? And for that, we turn to our partners at the Ministry of Health in order to plan out the implementation and bring it down to the patient, where it ideally is where the effect should be. I'll stop there.